My name is Alex, and 3 months ago, I did something that completely shattered my understanding of loyalty, friendship, and human nature. I staged my own death to see who would actually care when I was gone. What I discovered about the people closest to me left me questioning everything I thought I knew about relationships. If you want to see how a fake funeral can reveal the darkest truths about the people you trust most, stay with me, because this story will change how you view every relationship in your life. Before we dive into what happened, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you have ever wondered who would actually show up for you when it matters most. And subscribe because I'm going to share more real stories that expose the truth about human nature. The idea came to me during the lowest point of my life. I was 28, working a dead-end job at a marketing firm, living in a cramped apartment that I could barely afford, and feeling completely invisible to everyone around me. You know that feeling when you wonder if anyone would even notice if you just disappeared? That thought consumed me for weeks, until it evolved into something more specific. What if I could find out who actually cared about me without having to actually die? I had been struggling with depression for months after my long-term relationship ended, and my so-called best friend Mike had basically ghosted me when I needed support most. My family lived across the country, and we barely spoke except for obligatory holiday calls. My coworkers were friendly enough during office hours, but none of them knew anything real about my life. I felt like I was surrounded by people, but completely alone, like I was living in a world full of acquaintances, pretending to be friends. The plan started forming during one of those sleepless nights when your brain just will not shut off. What if I could test everyone in my life all at once? What if I could see their true reactions, their genuine emotions, without the performance people put on when they know you are watching? The more I thought about it, the more elaborate the idea became. I would fake my death, observe the aftermath, and finally know who actually gave Alex Morrison a damn about. I spent 2 weeks researching how to pull this off without committing any serious crimes. The key was making it believable but temporary. I found a small town about 4 hours away where I could lay low, rented a cheap motel room under a fake name, and started crafting my disappearance. I told my landlord I was taking a sudden work trip, set up an automatic email response, and withdrew enough cash to survive for a few weeks without using credit cards. The hardest part was writing the suicide note. I must have drafted it 20 times, trying to strike the right balance between believable despair and vague enough details that it would not traumatize anyone too badly when they eventually learned the truth. I made it sound like I had been struggling silently, thanked people for trying to help even though they had not, and left it deliberately unclear about the method. I wanted them to think I was gone without giving them graphic images, taunt them forever. On a rainy Tuesday morning in October, I left the note on my kitchen counter, turned off my phone, and drove high to my out. The plan was simple. Wait 3 days for the initial shock to wear off, then start monitoring social media and news coverage from fake accounts I had created. I would see who actually cared, who just posted performative grief for social media points, and who did not react at all. What not expect was how absolutely terrifying those first 24 hours would be. Sitting in that dingy motel room, knowing that people were probably finding my note, calling police, maybe even crying over me, I felt like I had crossed a line I could never uncross. The weight of what I was putting people through started crushing me almost immediately. But I was committed now. There was no backing out without making everything infinitely worse. By day 2, I had created fake social media profiles and started checking the responses. My landlord had found the note when I did not answer his calls about a maintenance issue. He called the police, who called my emergency contact, which was my sister Emma back in California. Within hours, the news had spread through my small circle of connections like wildfire. The first thing that shocked me was the sheer volume of responses. People I barely knew from high school were sharing memories I did not even remember. Coworkers who had never said more than hello in the elevator were posting lengthy tributes about what a kind person I was. My ex-girlfriend, Sarah, who had told me she never wanted to see me again, posted a heartbreaking message about regret and unfinished conversations. But then I started noticing the patterns, and that is when things got really interesting. Some people were clearly performing grief rather than feeling it. Their posts were perfectly crafted for maximum engagement, full of buzzwords about mental health awareness and suicide prevention. They were using my supposed death as a platform for their own social media presence, getting hundreds of likes and comments on their performative sadness. Others surprised me completely. Janet from accounting, who I had always assumed barely tolerated me, posted a simple message that made me cry in that crappy motel room. She wrote about how I had helped her move desks, when her back, something I had forgotten about, and how small acts of kindness matter realized more than people. She did not tag anyone, did not use any hashtags, just shared a genuine memory that showed she actually saw me as a human being. My sister Emma flew out immediately and was coordinating with police. Through my fake profiles, I could see her posting desperate pleas for anyone with information about where I might have gone. The raw pain in her messages was devastating to read. She was blaming herself, wondering what signs she had missed, reaching out to people from my past trying to understand what had driven me to this point. I realized I had severely underestimated how much my family actually cared despite our surface-level relationship. But the person who surprised me most was Mike, my former best friend who had been ignoring my calls for months. Instead of posting anything public, he had apparently shown up at my apartment and was working with police to piece together my final days. According to posts from mutual friends, he was refusing to give interviews or make statements, just quietly helping with the investigation. He looked terrible in the photos people were sharing, like he had not slept since hearing the news. The most shocking discovery came on day 3, when I realized that several people were not just mourning me, they were actively trying to help. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had organized a search party. 3 co-workers had pooled money to hire a private investigator because they thought the police were not moving fast enough. Even people who I thought barely knew I existed were taking time off work to look for me. As I watched all of this unfold from my hiding spot, something fundamental shifted in my understanding of relationships. I had been so focused on grand gestures and obvious displays of affection that I had completely missed the quiet ways people cared about me. The coworker who always saved me the good coffee in the break room. The neighbor who shoveled my walkway after snowstorms without being asked. The cashier at my local grocery store who knew my name and asked about my day. These people were not just performing grief. They were genuinely devastated by the loss of someone they saw as part of their daily lives. I had been invisible to myself, but apparently I was very visible to them. My supposed meaningless interactions had created a web of connections I never realized existed. But here is where the story takes a turn that I never saw coming, because on day 4, something happened that made me realize I had made a terrible mistake. Something that would force me to face consequences I never imagined and reveal truths about loyalty that were far more complex than I ever expected. On day 4, I woke up to my phone buzzing incessantly. I had kept it turned off since the beginning, but something made me power it on that morning. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were 47 missed calls from my sister Emma and dozens of text messages that grew increasingly frantic. The last one, sent at 3 a.m., simply said, "Alex, if you are reading this, please just send me one word. Anything. I cannot lose you too. I cannot lose you too." Those words hit me like a freight train because I suddenly remembered what I had somehow pushed from my mind during all my planning. Our older brother David had died in a car accident 5 years ago. Emma had been the one to identify his body. She had been the one to call our parents. She had been the one to plan his funeral while the rest of us fell apart. And now I was putting her through it all over again. I started shaking as I scrolled through the messages. She was not just grieving me, she was reliving David's death. She was talking about survivor's guilt, about failing another brother, about how she should have seen the signs this time. The depth of her trauma was something I had never considered when I planned this stupid test. But that was not even the worst part. The worst part was discovering that my fake death had created a domino effect of real consequences I never anticipated. Through my social media monitoring, I learned that my disappearance had triggered a genuine mental health crisis for at least 3 people in my orbit. My coworker Janet, the one who had posted that touching memory about helping her move desks, had apparently suffered a panic attack so severe that she was hospitalized. She had lost her own father to suicide 2 years earlier, and my note had sent her spiraling into a breakdown. She was on medical leave and undergoing intensive therapy. My ex-girlfriend, Sarah, had reached out to my sister, confessing that she blamed herself for my death because of how our relationship ended. She was seeing a crisis counselor and had started cutting herself again, something she had struggled with in college but had overcome years ago. My fake suicide note had become her trigger to relapse into self-harm. Even worse, my neighbor Mrs. Chen's elderly husband had suffered what appeared to be a stress-induced heart episode after spending 2 days searching for me in the woods behind our apartment complex. He was stable, but the doctors said the physical and emotional strain of the search had definitely contributed to his condition. I was not just testing loyalty anymore. I was destroying lives. The realization that my experiment had caused actual psychological and physical harm to innocent people made me sick to my stomach. I spent hours pacing that motel room, trying to figure out how to fix what I had broken. How do you come back from the dead without traumatizing people even more? How do you explain that their grief was based on a lie without making them feel like fools? But before I could figure out my next move, Day 5 brought a development that changed everything again. I was monitoring the local news website when I saw a headline that made me freeze. Local man's suicide note leads to discovery of larger mental health crisis. The article detailed how my disappearance had prompted several other people in my community to come forward about their own suicidal thoughts. Apparently, my fake death had inadvertently started a conversation about mental health that had been desperately needed. The article mentioned that 3 different people had reached out to crisis hotlines after reading about my case, saying that seeing the community's response made them realize they did not want to put their loved ones through that pain. My lie had somehow prevented other real deaths. The moral complexity of the situation was overwhelming. I had caused genuine trauma to people I cared about, but I had also accidentally saved lives. I had lied in the most fundamental way possible, but that lie had revealed truths about human connection that might never have surfaced otherwise. Through all of this chaos, I was still discovering things about people's loyalty that shocked me. Mike, my supposedly disloyal best friend, had apparently taken unpaid leave from his job to coordinate search efforts. I found out through mutual connections that he had been going through his own crisis when I was trying to reach out to him months earlier. His mother had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, and he had been so overwhelmed with becoming her caretaker that he had withdrawn from everyone, not just me. Instead of abandoning me out of selfishness, like I had assumed, he had been drowning in his own family emergency. And now, thinking he had lost me forever, he was blaming himself for not being there when I needed him. He had apparently told Emma that he would never forgive himself if I had died, thinking he did not care. The layers of misunderstanding were staggering. I had tested his loyalty based on incomplete information, and now my fake death was torturing him with guilt over a situation that was never really about loyalty at all. My boss at the marketing firm, someone I had always assumed saw me as completely replaceable, had apparently fought with HR to keep my position open indefinitely. She told my sister that she believed I was still alive somewhere and would come back when I was ready. She had been covering my responsibilities herself rather than hiring a replacement, working 12-hour days because she refused to give up on me. Even more surprising was learning that my building's maintenance guy, Carlos, had been checking my apartment daily since I disappeared. Not because the landlord asked him to, but because he was worried about my cat. I did not even know he knew I had a cat. But apparently, he had been slipping treats under my door for months whenever he saw me looking stressed. He had convinced my landlord to let him feed my cat rather than taking her to a shelter, insisting that I would come back for her. These discoveries were rewriting my entire understanding of how relationships work. I had been measuring loyalty by grand gestures and constant communication, but real loyalty was showing up in quiet, practical ways. It was people who noticed things about me that I did not even think they saw. It was people who protected my interests even when I was not around to appreciate it. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come, because on day 6, I discovered something that would force me to confront the ugliest truth about my experiment. I discovered that my sister Emma had not just been grieving me, she had been planning her own suicide. Hidden in her desperate social media posts and messages to friends was a pattern I recognized all too well because I had written something similar just days earlier. She was saying goodbye. Emma had always been the strong one in our family. After David died, she became the glue that held everyone together. She managed the funeral arrangements, supported our parents through their breakdown, and somehow kept functioning when the rest of us fell apart. But what I never realized was that she had never actually processed her own grief. She had just buried it deeper and deeper until my supposed death cracked her foundation completely. Through my fake profiles, I could see her friends becoming increasingly worried. Her posts were taking on that same tone of finality that I had used in my suicide note. She was giving away possessions, talking about how tired she was, mentioning that maybe she would see David and me soon. The signs were all there, and they were escalating rapidly. The horrifying irony was not lost on me. I had faked my death to test people's loyalty, and in doing so, I was about to cause my sister's real death. The person who loved me most in the world was going to die because she believed I was already gone. My test of loyalty was about to destroy the most loyal person in my life. I realized I had to end this immediately. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep the damage went. I spent day 6 doing a complete audit of everyone affected by my disappearance. And what I found painted a picture of interconnected trauma that spread far beyond anything I had imagined. My apartment building had become a hub of activity. Residents who had never spoken to each other before were now bonding over search efforts. Mrs. Chen had organized daily briefings in the lobby where people shared tips and coordinated search areas. The building's group chat, which had previously been used only for maintenance complaints, had turned into a 24-hour support network. But underneath the community spirit was a current of fear and suspicion. People were installing extra locks, checking on elderly neighbors obsessively, and questioning whether they really knew anyone around them. My fake suicide had made everyone hyper-aware of how isolated modern life could be. If someone could disappear so completely without anyone noticing until it was too late, how safe was anyone? The ripple effects extended into my workplace as well. My marketing firm had brought in grief counselors and was implementing new mental health protocols. Several employees had admitted to struggling with depression themselves. Inspired by the conversations, my disappearance had started. The company was investing thousands of dollars in mental health resources, all because of my lie. My ex-girlfriend, Sarah's situation, was deteriorating rapidly. She had confessed to mutual friends that our breakup had been triggered by her discovery that I had been struggling with depression. She had felt overwhelmed by my emotional needs and ended things because she did not know how to help me. Now she was convinced that her abandonment had directly caused my death. She was cutting again, drinking heavily, and had lost her job because she could not function. The guilt was eating me alive. Every person who was suffering because of my fake death was someone I had genuinely cared about. I had not set out to hurt anyone, but my selfish desire to test their loyalty had become a weapon of mass emotional destruction. But there was something even more disturbing that I discovered during my deep dive into the aftermath. Not everyone was responding with pure grief and concern. Some people were using my supposed death as an opportunity. My landlord had already started showing my apartment to prospective tenants, despite telling my sister he would hold it indefinitely. He was advertising it as recently available due to tragic circumstances, and charging a premium because of the updated fixtures. He was literally profiting off my fake death. One of my coworkers, Derek, had immediately volunteered to take over my biggest client account permanently. He was positioning himself as the hero, stepping up in a crisis. But I could see through social media that he was already celebrating the career advancement my disappearance had created for him. He was posting about new opportunities and responsibilities with barely concealed excitement. Even some of my so-called friends were revealing their true colors. Tom, who had posted a lengthy tribute about our friendship, was already organizing a party for the upcoming weekend. When someone questioned the timing, he defended it by saying I would have wanted people to celebrate, but I could see the real life, rather than mourn death motivation, in his planning messages. He was using my death as an excuse to throw a big social event where he would be the center of attention as the grieving friend. These discoveries were crushing in a different way than the genuine grief I had witnessed. At least the people who were suffering were doing so because they actually cared about me. These opportunists were treating my supposed death like a networking event or a chance to upgrade their lives. They were the ones who had failed my loyalty test in the most spectacular way possible. But even among the genuine mourners, I started noticing troubling patterns. Some people seemed to be competing over who had been closer to me, who understood my pain better, who was more devastated by the loss. My death had become a social currency, where grief translated to attention and sympathy from others. My high school friend Rachel was posting daily updates about her emotional state, each one more dramatic than the last. She was scheduling her breakdowns for maximum engagement, timing her most heart-wrenching posts for peak social media hours. She was even starting a fundraiser for suicide prevention in my name, despite the fact that we had not spoken in over 2 years, and she knew virtually nothing about my actual mental health struggles. The performative nature of some people's grief was almost as disturbing as the opportunism. They were not mourning me. They were mourning the version of me that existed in their social media feeds. They were grieving a character I had played rather than the person I actually was. Meanwhile, the people who were suffering most authentically were doing so quietly. Mike had not posted anything public since the initial news broke. My sister's most desperate messages were private. Carlos, the maintenance guy, never mentioned his daily cat visits to anyone. The depth of someone's real loyalty seemed to be inversely related to how much they publicized their grief. This pattern made me realize something profound about my original experiment. I had designed my test to reveal who would publicly mourn me, but true loyalty was not necessarily performative. The people who cared most were often the ones who processed their emotions privately, who took practical action rather than posting emotional tributes. I was learning that loyalty was not a simple binary of caring versus not caring. It was a complex spectrum that included everything from genuine love to opportunistic exploitation, from performative grief to quiet, practical support. Some people loved me but expressed it in ways I had not recognized. Others appeared devoted but were actually serving their own needs. The most painful realization was that I had been measuring loyalty by all the wrong metrics. I had wanted grand gestures and constant communication, but real loyalty was showing up when it mattered, even if no one was watching. It was Mike taking leave from work despite his own family crisis. It was Carlos feeding my cat without being asked. It was my boss fighting to keep my job open when she had every practical reason to replace me. As I sat in that motel room on day 6, surrounded by evidence of the chaos I had created, I knew I had to surface soon. Emma's deteriorating mental state made every hour of delay potentially fatal. But I also knew that revealing the truth would create a whole new kind of trauma for everyone involved. How do you tell people that their grief was based on a lie without destroying their trust forever? How do you apologize for putting them through the worst experience of their lives just to satisfy your own curiosity about their feelings? How do you come back from the dead without killing the relationships you were trying to test? The complexity of human loyalty had turned out to be far messier than I ever imagined. People were not simply loyal or disloyal, caring or uncaring. They were flawed humans doing their best with incomplete information and their own emotional baggage. My test had not revealed clean answers about who truly cared about me. Instead, it had exposed the beautiful, ugly, complicated reality of how people love each other imperfectly. But before I could figure out how to fix the damage I had caused, Day 7 brought a twist that would shatter my understanding of loyalty one final time, because someone had figured out what I was really doing, and they were about to expose my lie in the most public way possible. I woke up on Day 7 to the sound of my phone buzzing with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it, and a voice I did not recognize said the words that made my blood freeze in my veins. Alex Morrison, right? The dead guy who has been watching his own funeral from a motel room 4 hours away? My heart stopped. Someone had figured it out. But who? And how? I know you are there, the voice continued. I can hear you breathing. My name is Detective Sarah Collins, and we need to talk. Now. The police. Somehow, the police had tracked me down. My mind raced through all the ways I could have been discovered. The fake social media accounts, the cash withdrawals, the motel registration. I had been so careful, but apparently not careful enough. How did you find me? I managed to croak out. Does not matter right now, Detective Collins replied. What matters is that you have approximately 6 hours before your sister Emma attempts to take her own life. She has purchased a bottle of sleeping pills and written her own goodbye note. She plans to join you and your brother David tonight. The phone slipped from my trembling hands. Emma was going to kill herself because of me. Because of my stupid, selfish experiment. The thing I had been most afraid of was actually happening, and I was running out of time to stop it. Are you still there? Detective Collins asked when I picked up the phone again. Yes, I whispered. How do you know about Emma? Because her roommate called us when she found the pills in the note. We have officers with her now, but she is not responding to intervention. She keeps saying she needs to be with her brothers, that she failed both of you. The only thing that might save her life is you walking through that door alive. I was already throwing my few belongings into a bag. I am coming back right now. Do not let anything happen to her. There is more you need to know before you come back, Detective Collins said, her voice taking on a harder edge. Your little experiment has caused a lot more damage than you realize. We have had to launch a missing persons investigation, coordinate search and rescue efforts, and counsel multiple people who are having mental health crises because of your stunt. The department has spent thousands of dollars and countless hours on this case. I know. I am sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Sorry does not cover it. When you surface, you're going to face consequences. Filing a false police report, reckless endangerment, possibly fraud depending on how deep we dig into your activities. Your little loyalty test is going to cost you. The legal ramifications had not even occurred to me in my panic about Emma. Of course, there would be consequences. You cannot fake your own death without breaking multiple laws. But at that moment, I did not care about criminal charges. I only cared about saving my sister. How long do I have? I asked. Based on her note, she plans to take the pills at midnight. She wants to die at the same time you supposedly did, according to her calculations from your suicide note. That gives us about 5 hours if you leave right now. I was already in my car, speeding toward the highway. But as I drove, Detective Collins dropped another bombshell that nearly made me crash. There is something else you should know. We were not the ones who figured out you were alive. Someone else did. And they have been tracking your fake social media accounts for the past 2 days. They know where you are, they know what you have been doing, and they are planning to expose you publicly before you can control the narrative. Who? I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. Your friend Mike. He never believed you were actually dead. He has been conducting his own investigation and he figured out your plan. He is the one who contacted us. Mike, the friend I had thought abandoned me, the one whose loyalty I had questioned most. He had known all along that I was alive, and instead of exposing me immediately, he had been working with police to bring me back safely. He was trying to protect me, even as I was putting everyone through hell. He wants to talk to you, Detective Collins continued. He is actually the one who discovered Emma's suicide plan. He has been monitoring all your family and friends, trying to minimize the damage from your stunt. He figured out that Emma was spiraling and called her roommate to do a welfare check. That phone call changed everything. I drove straight back to the city, my hands shaking the entire way. When I walked into that hospital room and saw Emma alive, when I held her and told her I was sorry, when Mike hugged me despite everything I had put him through, I finally understood what loyalty really meant. It was not about grand gestures or perfect communication. It was about showing up when it mattered most, even when someone did not deserve it. I faced criminal charges, lost some friendships, and had to rebuild trust with everyone I had deceived. But I also discovered that real loyalty is not something you can test or measure. It exists in the quiet moments, the daily acts of care, the people who see you at your worst and choose to stay anyway. My fake death taught me that the people worth keeping in your life are not the ones who perform their love for an audience. They are the ones who feed your cat when you disappear, who take time off work to search for you, who refuse to give up on you even when you have given up on yourself. The experiment destroyed some relationships, but it also revealed the unshakable bonds I had been too blind to see. True loyalty cannot be tested because it does not need to be proven. It simply exists, steady and constant, waiting for you to notice it has been there all along.